Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another exciting episode of Victory Never Sleeps. This is, of course, our monthly Adulting with Alan episodes. We are joined by Lawspeaker Turnage. Glitch there, but yes, absolutely. Thank you for watching. I hope you continue watching. Top of the show stuff. Hope everybody is excited for Midsummer coming up. Got Midsummer at Odenshof. That is the premier event at Odenshof from June the 19th through the 21st in Brownsville, California. If you can make it out there, please do. I will be out there, and I'll be looking forward to seeing our Odenshof folk and meeting folk I may not be able or may not have met yet. So if you watch the program and you can make it there, I would encourage you to do so. It's our oldest Hof, and it is our longest standing premier event. There should be amazing people there. It's going to be a great time. You'll also get a chance to meet or reconvene with our founder, Steve McNallen, and his lovely wife, Githya Sheila McNallen. So it's always a good opportunity. And like I said, I am flying back out there to be with folks for Midsummer. But if you can't, good news. That same weekend at each of our 4 other Hofs, you have the opportunity to be there and celebrate Midsummer with your folk. So I'd encourage you to do that. If you find yourself within driving distance of Murdoch, Minnesota, Linden, North Carolina, White Springs, Florida, or Austintown, Ohio, or, of course, like I mentioned, Brownsville, California. Love to see you guys there. Other top of the show stuff. Thank you all for being amazingly generous. Pillar of generosity, Matthew Bean, favored us with a tremendous donation last week, and we really appreciate that. That moved all of our endeavors forward. Amongst his total $32,000 donation to the Asatru Folk Assembly, we have $1,000 that went towards our Phrasehof payoff. So what are we looking at towards the Phrasehof progress? We have already paid $50,797 towards paying off that Hof. We're doing fantastic. That's 40.6%. That takes us to about $100 per member would pay that Hof off today. Thank you, everybody who's been generous. If you want to donate, runestone.org/donate. And thank you to Matthew Bean for his tremendous generosity. It's much, much appreciated. Also, in that amazing pouring out of generosity, we have $1,000 towards the pavilion at Sigerhang. What are we looking at on that? So we're already 21.8% of the way there. I can look at the deal, but I think $38 per member gets us there to having that immediately, just putting it in perspective. So yeah, thank you everybody who's been so generous. We appreciate you guys. We have had 3 consecutive matching donation endeavors put forth by members to match funds in that donation, which is much appreciated. You guys have really come through big for us. So thank you guys for that. And like I said, anybody who would like to contribute, runestone.org/donate gets you there. So thank you very much. Appreciate y'all. A couple others who are our stalwarts of generosity on the program and always start off our show with their generosity. GW Farnsworth donated $50 towards the pavilion. Thank you for that. Stephen in Japan donated $10 towards paying off Phrasehof and $5 towards the pavilion. Thank you for that, Stephen. We appreciate you. And Gilbert Page donated $150 towards paying off Phrasehof. Thank you, Gilbert. Also, Jeffrey in Texas donated $10 towards the pavilion and $10 to Muirsoft. So thank you for that. We appreciate all of you guys' generosity more than you realize. With that, Alan, you have a variety of things. It says bumper stickers, elevator speeches, and Chesterton's fence. So you have the floor.
Thank you. I will try to tie all those topics together in like a uniform whole, as I sometimes manage to do. The first question, though, from my last show, did you buy yourself a squatty potty yet?
No.
You should. And, you know, I'm not a paid endorser, but I am. There you go. So anyway, I'm a longtime user of Squatty Potty, not of other stuff. So anyhows, so to start with, bumper stickers, right? And it ties in with elevator speeches eventually in the long end up of this diatribe. But certainly, you know, we've always described Asatru as the religion with homework. And not so much so as it used to be. I think when in a lot of times in the earlier days, not me, but many practitioners didn't feel like you were worthy of being able to call on the gods unless you had read a bunch of the books and had this complicated understanding of the lore and the meaning of a lot of these stories and so forth. I don't cotton to that particular viewpoint. I think that if you are a European person and call on the gods with sincerity, then they will hear you and your ancestors will hear you. So you don't have to dig into the stuff the way us Gothar do. You don't have to have this complicated, intricate understanding the way some do. But what does that have to do with bumper stickers? It's the exact opposite of a bumper sticker. But what it comes down to in a certain way is that one thing that I've heard fairly often is that you don't really understand a topic unless you can explain it to a 5-year-old, like Aubrey. So and I think it's also true that complicated ideas can be distilled into a few phrases, a few short phrases. And I wouldn't say trite phrases because that has a negative connotation. One of the friends of mine that I used to argue with about politics and other trivia was markedly progressive about his ideology, which was not his only flaw. But when we would have these discussions and I would throw a phrase at him and he'd say, you know, that's just a bumper sticker. That's just bumper sticker philosophy. And yes, in some ways it is. You know, like if you believe in the Second Amendment, you can have a bumper sticker that says, my rights shall not be infringed, straight out of the Second Amendment, in case you didn't know that. Or the now famous phrase from publicized by the movie 300, Molan Levy, I'm probably pronouncing that, probably butchering the pronunciation, but, you know, come and take them. And, you know, so yes, there is a complicated, intricate understanding and historical precedent for those sorts of bumper sticker philosophies, but that doesn't make it any less meaningful, or, you know, because when you cook it all down, that's what it means. I can defend myself. I have that right. And in many other things, that is true as well. And one of the, you know, It can even come down to our mottos. It's about roots. It's about coming home. Asatru is the natural birthright of every European, every person of European descent. And just because you live in Europe doesn't mean you're European. So those sorts of things can be distilled into a little bit of short phrasing. And one of my favorites is, and I should display this bumper sticker. I actually think about making some more, but from the old prior iteration of the Asatru Alliance, back when they were folkish, they produced a bumper sticker that just says, "Odin lives." And in those two short words, that says so much. Our gods are alive. Our gods are with us. Our ancestors are with us. Our traditions are alive and being revived by the Asatru Folk Assembly. And so we can distill that into a bumper sticker. So, that bumper sticker philosophy, believe me, I will explain all the 862 books that I've read on the topic if you want to sit still that long, or you can just take me at my word. Odin lives. And a man should not travel far on the road without his weapons, because you never know when you need a spear to hand. So that's basically the summary of all of that. It dovetails with the elevator speech because, and again, especially to people who have never heard of Asatru or are unaware that there is a pagan revival coming on to our own folkways, they should know that. And sorry, go ahead. Yes.
I was going to say, would now be the time to talk about bumper stickers before moving on, or would you like to do the whole bit first?
Sure, go ahead.
I was going to say, it works nicely because we frequently have members reaching out about that. Either that specifically or the idea of stickers. There seems to be a thing about like pamphleting with stickers, putting little stuff with a phrase such as you mentioned, places. There's straight up putting stickers on light posts and things, but there's also, leaving stuff in like community, I'm sure the right word will come up, with little cork boards that you stick stuff into at the gas station or at whatever, or distributing little, perhaps regular stickers, if not bumper stickers that way. It's something people are always asking about. And I think a first point, what do you feel is effective that way? And secondly, what would you advise people to do so we are not littering or defacing stuff?
Well, first of all, we have started working on some, and I know there are some things that meet with the modern attention span. In other words, a couple or three sentences of language that meet with meet with our mission, and I think especially if coupled with Saint Harold's image, especially if coupled with do right and fear none. But those are absolutely the sorts of things that would do well and would capture people's attention and capture their imagination. We are our deeds. Those are definitely the sorts of things that can get people's attention. And I would contribute toward a bumper sticker fund, or toward getting some vinyls made up. all of those sorts of things. Odin lives with our, and all, always everywhere with the runestone URL. All those sorts of phrases definitely can capture people's attention. And one of the things that I know it is sort of out on the limit, out on the edge, where looks like we like to be, white men find Odin. That's that's certainly the sort of thing that would get attention. And coupled, especially, and I love the Trihorn logo. I use it in my meditation in various ways. So I'm definitely a fan of that. People more recognize the Valknot or the Raven banner. So, a mix of all of those sorts of things in a variety pack of stickers and cards that we could hand out, certainly spectacular kinds of attention grabbing stickering. And as we know, I'm definitely an advocate of being a good citizen. So we don't want to just put these things up willy-nilly in a way that is defacing public property, but it would certainly go well to say overlay some graffiti or some less desirable piece of propaganda that's out there in the public space. I mean, if Cardi B is out there, maybe you could slap one of those on her. I don't want to insult her. I don't even know really who that is, but you know what I mean. I mean, if somebody else has already put up some stuff, you're not adding to the ugliness of the public arena. You are improving it. So those sorts of things, absolutely. Having the little cards, our Asatru AFA cards, stick them in books at the New Age bookshop, if you can stand to go in there, which I used to be able to do, or like in the philosophy or history section at one of the big chain bookstores. I've read all of those, so I have to order stuff from Amazon now or from Arctos. but those are definitely the sorts of things that capture people's attention. 2 or 3 words, honor your folk, come home to your own faith. Those are all definitely in that family, and I would support having a variety of those available for sale or giving away.
Excellent. All right, didn't mean to distract. Carry on about the elevator speeches.
That's okay. No, I'm glad you reined me in because I tend to race pell-mell. Elevator speech. For those not familiar with the concept, the idea of the elevator speech is, you get on an elevator with somebody, you press your floor, and they notice your hammer. Or, I mean, in the broader context, it's about other things. They see your shoes and you go, hey, what's the story about those shoes? But of course, what we're talking about is they see your hammer and you go, hey, is that an anchor? Or maybe they recognize what it is. I've seen those things around. What is that? And so you've got the time between floors, 2 minutes, 3 minutes to blurb out your bumper sticker about what Asatru is. And so I think, Matt, it's a good idea if we bat some ideas around about what that is. My own particular thing, I like to say Asatru is the naturally arising tribal religion of the European peoples. And if they're curious, like they may go, what are you talking about? We're not tribes. Indians are tribes. I mean, there's 1,000 places that they can go, that they can take that discussion if they're interested. Some people will just go, and you're not going to reach them no matter what you tell them. So, or you plant the seed and maybe they go home and look it up. But, this hammer honors Thor, who is one of the patron gods of the European peoples, whom we worshipped for thousands of years. And I have finally broken the habit of saying anything like the pre-Christian religion, because I don't like to mark it in that way, because we are both the pre and post-Christian religion of the European peoples. And because I think when people hear that, they are liable to chafe at it in the wrong way. If they've been Christian or think of themselves as sort of vaguely Christian, as most white people do, then, they may erect a wall of, they may not hear all the rest of the stuff, so you just work around that particular issue just by not bringing it up. And and if they mention Christianity, yes, Christianity came along, but for 100,000 years before that, we worshiped the gods of our own people, Odin and Wodenaz and Thurisaz and Tivaz, and give it to them in a way that realize, like, especially somebody who's never heard of it or barely heard of it, you have to spoon feed it to them. And and if you do it in a way that is inviting, because trust me, anybody who's the least remotely curious, what I want to do is jump in their face and give them a bunch of literature and, stand over their shoulder until they go to runestone.org and read the whole thing. I mean, that's my natural predilection, is to want them to go ahead and do it while they can. But if we can just get enough people to hear of us, hear about who we are, what we do, maybe they don't come in the first time, but maybe the third or fourth or 12th time that they hear about Asatru, then they develop enough curiosity, or the next time they see a hammer, they go, oh yeah, I've heard about you guys. It's cool to see another one. And eventually they will find their way home, hopefully.
Yeah, so a couple of things that I think are worth noting that do kind of connect these things. I mean, this is all about advertising and presentation, and it's about maximizing your minutes when you have short amounts of opportunity to plant seeds. So, and a lot of these things we repeat on the program, but I think they bear repeating, and I think they bear reminding. You being the person who engages this in whatever way you do are the de facto spokesperson of our faith. The better you look, the better you present yourself, the more compelling the case that you make in the seconds or minutes you have to speak to this person about our faith. And I mean that in a lot of different metrics. Yes, if you are attractive, that is always better than if you are unattractive. If you are in good physical condition, shoot, if you are in excellent physical condition, that's fantastic. If you look, and your appearance shows that you take the way that you appear seriously, and you have discipline and dignity, that's going to help. But there's a lot of other factors to that too. Look happy. Don't look scowly and angry and unapproachable. If you look like you're enjoying your life and you're approachable and you're a happy, well-adjusted person, that goes a long way. If you're not scary looking And yeah, that has to do with you walking around with a grumpy face, but it also has to do with you deliberately wearing clothes that are meant to be shocking. That may attract a certain edgelord group of people, but a lot of the people that we want will be repelled by it because they don't know what to make of it. They lack the context, or they do know what to make of it, and you're going out of your way to be obnoxious with the way you dress. Having a friendliness and an openness when you're talking to them, all these things, to maximize your minutes, you want to be able to hit them from a bunch of different fronts. If you can present something that is, I don't know, catchy and sets a hook linguistically, if you have something that is compelling logically, those are great. But you also want to maximize the nonverbals by your appearance, by your demeanor and your friendliness. You have those opportunities, and you are a living billboard for Asatru if you choose to be. The other thing is, wear your hammer. Wear your hammer out. Wear your hammer publicly. You have every right to do that at every place you are. If you're in some strange workplace where that's verboten, I think those are getting fewer and further between. But, again, go by whatever your work standard is. But if your coworker can wear a crucifix, you can certainly wear your hammer. But it provokes those conversations. I think that's really important. Then you get to all right, well, what do you do when there's the conversation? I think messaging is really important here, and it makes it kind of challenging. The things that are going to get the most understanding sometimes are at cross purposes with our messaging, which makes it challenging. We don't want to, and I hope this makes sense in the way I'm presenting it. We don't want to proactively compare Asatru to anything. Asatru is a standalone thing. What is Asatru? Asatru is faith in the Aesir. It's the original religion of Europeans. I thought Europeans were Christians. A lot of people may think that, but Christianity came to Europe and blah, 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 and you can go from there. You can go wherever they want to take the conversation reactively. If they bring up, anytime that we want to use comparisons or negative things, we want that as a response to a question or as something they bring up and then we have to respond to. We don't want to present what we do in comparison to anything else. If we present what we do as counterpunching something, we have already established in their minds that that other thing is the big dog and that we're some kind of brand X contender to it. We don't want that. We want to present ourselves as the thing. Oh, Christianity, you mean those guys? Okay, well, since you bring them up, it sounds dumb and it sounds subtle, but I do think that messaging is really important. And the point of comparison, we want to try to avoid. Al?
No, that's absolutely right. And, of course, that's one of the reasons that I harp on language the way that I do. 20 years ago when I started in this, on this path, we were a bunch of, Viking vulgarians. But now we've evolved where we are, where we really are, a family-based faith who honors our ancestors and respects the upright nobility of our culture. And that's why, like for most people, you are the only Asatruer that they know. You're the only guy who wears that hammer. You're the only woman who wears the little lady with the mead cup thing. And so so to put your best foot forward always, yes, with a happy demeanor, and you win more friends with honey than with vinegar. All those things are true. We want to be the kind of people that other people want to be around, and we are those kinds of people. Like when I go to the Hoff, any Hoff that I'm at is always so welcoming and friendly and open, that it's a beautiful thing to be around the families that we have, the people that we are, is it's a wonderful, joyous experience. Because we are the people who believe that this life is joyous, that this life, that our people, this world is sacred, and we act that way. And that's why, we have a lot of the values of the I hate to say it, like the broader pagan community, where, yes, we honor and nurture the earth. We are in charge of it, but we are benevolent dictators. We honor and nurture our families. Children are not in charge, though. So those are the sorts of things that, again, as we present that way in the world, then the people who see us, they will come to understand that we're the good guys, and they will want to be around that more and more.
So since you bring it up, see, as a response, we don't want to. The forces of chaos that have such prominence in the world around us try to label many of the things that are our core values as being bad and villainous. In those chaotic circles that unfortunately control the media and control a lot of the narrative in certainly, I don't know, vapid college age people's minds, whiteness is bad, heterosexuality is bad, traditional values are bad, being a man is bad. So there's a constant push to say that anything we believe is villainous and that we are then villains. Don't lean into that. Don't let that affect the way you think, and don't, as a way to combat it, celebrate the bad guy image. We're the good guys. Don't ever forget that, and don't get tricked into identifying with the negative stereotype they try to put on you. It sounds so common sense, but when you hear it enough, eventually you'll see some of our people that are easily swayed acting as if they are in fact the bad guy. Don't do that.
No, absolutely. And one of the authors that I have read a good deal of, watched several of his videos, is Jonathan Bowden, notorious English patriot, and he had one of the great phrases that I've taken to heart, and when presented the opportunity or the necessity to address some of the things that maybe, if you want to say it this way, some of the excesses of that Western civilization has engaged in, conquering people, being mean to people, and that sort of thing. Sure, yes, absolutely, that happened. We did that. In an ideal world, that wouldn't be necessarily the way to interact with other cultures. But it is also a fact of life. It is a historical fact that cultures clash, and again, one of those bumper sticker ideas that is always in my head in that situation is, when it's us versus them, I take us every time. And so, yes, if you read about some of the, again, like the cultural clashes, why would you want to go out and, kill these other people? Well, they were trying to kill us. And so, when it's kill or be killed, again, easy choice. And yes, we have been aggressive in trying and taking territory and all that sort of thing. I think there's absolutely a way to make that be reasonable in the big picture. We are trying to impose order into a chaotic universe, into a chaotic world, the world of Midgard. We have succeeded in greater or lesser extent in imposing order in various parts of Midgard. And yes, that comes at a price, I mean, and at the same time, and that applies to like every arena, right? Like one of the tropes right now that them, we know who they are, always hit us with is, well, what about slavery? What about, you guys enslaved all these people? Yes, we did. Slavery has existed since there were two men with pointy sticks who could gang up on another guy who didn't have a pointy stick. And so for certainly hundreds of thousands of years, probably millions of years, there have been slaves. We didn't invent slavery. And we, Western civilization, we're the only civilization to end slavery. So when they hit you with that, that is that's a deflection. That, yes, we enslave people. And Jonathan Bowden's term is you step over it. Yes, this happened. Next.
So first, couple of points. That is tremendously valuable. And so these kind of tie together. Have an intellectual conversation with people if you've got the time and if they're actually want to engage in that, by all means. But I think your first and best order of business in that is determine whether it's an actual conversation or whether it is name calling. Don't defend, you guys are colonizers. Okay, what are you talking about? Well, when you guys colonize stuff. Okay, what stuff? Who are you talking about? And then you can get specific. A lot of the time, they don't have another step. They heard their friends say a thing, and so they say it, and they don't know anything about it. And that is really telling. And I dare say one, but at least, gotten them to retreat and acknowledge, well, maybe I should read a little bit more about that then. On a number of occasions, when people come at me with, what they think is elevated name calling, don't respond to, you're racist. What does that mean? What are you talking about? Talk about a thing, not a name or a label. I think that's always a valuable thing to do. And the other thing is, when you don't recoil in fear when they pull out the garlic and crucifix and silver bullets of calling you names, they don't know what to do with that. And sometimes that short circuits something right there, and they don't have another step because that's always worked. We're in a time where it has become very, very easy for the forces of chaos to call somebody homophobic or something and have an immediate victory in the person apologizing and backpedaling, and they don't know what to do if you don't do that. Feel like whatever. Well, yeah. Okay, they're done. That's all they had, and then you can kind of continue. So there's a power in that too.
Right. No, absolutely. And certainly one thing to know, like if somebody comes at it from that sort of name calling perspective, and it's obvious in the first couple of exchanges that you're not going to reach them. I read years ago and probably said on this show, and I'm about to say it again, the left does not argue in good faith. They are not trying to have an intellectual exchange where they say some ideas and you say some ideas, and like you're going to try to reach some common understanding about the way the world is. They have all of that preconceived. They have this packaged ideology that comes from the Frankfurt School, if you want to name it. And it's many iterations in our institutions that the world is thus and so because white people are evil. you're not going to reach them. Don't waste your time arguing with them. All it's going to do, what's the thing about, wrestling with a pig? The pig likes it, and you both end up looking like pigs. Okay. You're never going to persuade them at all, ever. So that's when you just give them the hand, like, whatever, and find something more productive to do.
So, Alan, who is this Chesterton fellow, and what's up with his fence?
Okay, so this is some more of my obscure reading in the nether reaches of conservative and traditional, if you want to say it this way, traditionalist ideology. G.K. Chesterton, famous formerly, back when people gave a rip about such things. He is an English writer who wrote mostly at the beginning of the 20th century. And the idea of Chesterton's fence is an idiom or example that he used to talk about the destruction that progressives were already beginning to work on the world. And I think it's very useful in the analogies that in the way that we see Mouse Utopia unfolding idiocracy in the present arena. What is Chesterton's fence? All right, so Chesterton, in this thought process, he envisions like a progressive and a traditionalist walking along down a path, and there's a fence. Okay. And of course, the progressive is all about removing boundaries. We should uproot this fence. This fence is harshing my buzz. It's in my way. We need to get this out of here. I'm not able to fully actualize myself with this fence here in the way of whatever it is that I want to do. And before I aged out of my libertarianism, before I matured out of my libertarianism, I would sort of be in that same mindset. Like, you can't tell me what to do. But the traditionalist, conservative, if that's the term that you want to use, would, like, before he would say something along the lines of, before we go pulling this fence up, let's think about why it's here. Why did someone put a fence here? What is this fence designed to do? What is this barrier that is between, like the way we would say it, there's this barrier here that someone erected 600 years ago, 10,000 years ago. They put this barrier up so that to help divide order from chaos. The word meme was not originally written about a Facebook post. The memeology is about those sorts of cultural ideals. The cultural ideology, specifically for us, Western civilization, pardon the redundancy, but specifically for us, Chesterton's fence then would be about those sorts of things. And maybe the easy example is marriage, right? Marriage is a man and a woman who partner together so that they, not exclusively, but primarily and in large part, so that they can raise children in a stable environment. And, of course, the left has come along, feminism primarily, but all the other progressive ideologies that have to do with uprooting all these cultural boundaries. So you don't need marriage. You can just have, women can raise kids by themselves. We don't need men. We just need a child support check. So they uprooted that fence, right? They have undone marriage. And we can see that both in the collapsing marriage rate, in the skyrocketing rate of unwed motherhood, and in the high divorce rate. And what has that done? If you, and look, I'm divorced. I know that it's, that stuff is not easy. I put it all down again. It's the cultural enrichment brought about by the culture of critique. But but what has that done? I mean, look at the way that the mental illness among children, and actually studies show, and I hate to use that phrase, but they do show, those studies done by sociologists and psychologists demonstrate that the number one indicator, the number one leading cause or indication of mental disturbance in children is divorce. And it's, it's a very real phenomenon. And when I say stuff like this, I'm not saying this as a way to belittle women. Women are our companions. They complement us with the E, the complement. They are our other halves, our better halves in many ways. Biologically, though, women are, 8 million years of evolution. They are caretakers for the home and of children. And, but in the modern world, because of the ills of feminism and the way that we've been led astray by the forces of chaos, they don't always get to implement that. Even though, again, studies show that most women would rather be at home, but they can't be because, and there's complicated reasons about why housing is so expensive and blah, blah, blah. And I don't want to get too far off on that track because we're talking about Chesterton's fence and why it is that the cultural meme of marriage is such an important foundational institution for Western civilization. And because of that, that is one of the primary things that the Frankfurt School set about to unwind. And I can't remember the name of the book that they produced in 1918 or whatever it was, but the foundational element of Western civilization is the family, and so we need to destroy the family, and that's what they've done. And because of cheap consumer goods and cable and smartphones and all that stuff, we are contributing to our own demise as the machine eats its way through Western civilization. But, if we could find a way, we traditionalists, if we could find a way to throttle that back, I think that's one of the things that we could do it. And again, there are any numbers of examples, and that's just the easy one that comes to mind. And Matt, I would entertain anything else that you want to posit along that regard. But that's, again, marriage is the easy one to me, and so but any of those cultural boundaries, okay, maybe no one is. Children recognizing and respecting their elders, okay, that too is has gone the way of the dinosaur in large part. But again, why do they do that? Because kids don't know anything. Kids are dumb. Okay. Maybe some of them have a little bit of smart, but they're not experienced. Why can't I just go out in the road and play in traffic? Why can't I just stick this fork in the electric socket? Okay. Well, Chesterton's fence would suggest that you don't go out in the road because that's a good way to get smashed. You don't stick a fork in the electrical socket because you'll blow a breaker and Dad will get all pissy because he's got to go out in the closet and swap the breaker over or whatever. So those sorts of cultural memetics are designed to keep our civilization from descending into chaos. And so when somebody asks you, why do we do things this way? Because 200,000 years of civilizational evolution has demonstrated that this is the way to do it. And before you start doing it some other way, you do a little test over here. You don't upend the whole civilization because Gertrude Stein's got her panties in a knot or whatever it is.
100%. My dad taught me something one time, and forget what the occasion was, but I was some kind of a teenager of some age about some nonsense. And he's like, well, why would you want to do, whatever different thing? I was like, oh, I should do this thing. He's like, well, why would you do that? Why not? And he's like, no, you don't need a why not. You stay the course unless there's a significant reason to deviate. It's really funny. And again, different people got different ideas about vaccines and whatnot. But it came up again in a very sadly ironic way. That spoke to me perhaps the most when considering childhood vaccinations, when that was being heavily pushed by any medical establishment when we had Aubrey. And, long story short, my father and my stepmother and I are fairly estranged over that and COVID stuff. And he didn't see the relation, but I'm like, okay, start out with this baby that's very healthy. Everybody around me's healthy. Things are going pretty good. Why would I stab this baby with many different injections of lots of different cocktails that I'm not given a compelling reason that I need to, other than because trust the science? And it didn't occur. And I mean, we may find different reasons for those things, but the thought process is really important. And I would encourage anybody listening to the show to apply this in all areas of your life. Something that I don't know if this is a slight detour on the theme or not, but one thing. All right, Alan started the show with some old, 1980s, 1990s Asatru themes that get said that kind of get passe but are worth remarking on, about Asatru's a religion with homework. Well, any religion that you care about should be the religion with homework, but also, no, you don't need to be a scholar to worship the gods. In fact, I guarantee you 97% of the worshipers of the gods in the course of history were probably not scholars, probably not literate in any sort of sense. But the other one is this like anti-dogma stance that a lot of people had early on in the modern resurgence of Asatru. Dogma is important, but with this caveat, we should always be willing to re-examine why we do a thing and go through the thought process of asking why the fence is there. Courage and truth are both values that we hold dear in Asatru. Having the intellectual courage and I guess just the personal honesty to re-examine perpetually why we think the things that we think. Should we alter course or should we double down? That's always a valuable exercise. If you're right, it strengthens your resolve and it reassures you. If you're wrong, and I don't mean like 180 wrong, but if you're off of the mark, it should give you cues on how to trend closer to what you're trying to accomplish and closer to the right way to do it. And I think we owe that to ourselves. We owe that to our fellows within Asatru. We owe that to our families. And ultimately, we owe that to our gods to try to refine who we are and what we believe to the closest degree of perfection that we're able to. And hopefully that trends closer over time.
Absolutely. And, like one example, and Matt, I know you were there, although I won't, because we bounced this guy out of the Gothar program because of certain other problems that he had. But, like in the old days, there was no processing in a sunwise circle. We just kind of, okay, it's time for bloat. We'd all just kind of stand in a circle. So we have developed and refined these practices as we have matured our ritual practice. Vaccine, I don't want to spend a lot of time on that. I feel very strongly the same way that you do. But I can understand that there's, at least childhood vaccines, there's at least an argument one way or the other. The COVID vaccine was a massive untested mistake that, the more people got sick from the vaccine, then they were doubling down like, that's utter. But at the same time, if there was an Ebola outbreak in the United States and they developed an Ebola vaccine, I would probably take it, but that's that rational thing of, and that's one of the hard parts of our religion is we're not all yes and not no.
So my story lacked a bit of nuance that I think is important. The factor in there was no research would allow me to fairly examine why I should or why I shouldn't. I just had the strong arm of big medical telling me that I had to because reasons.
I've got the books.
That's not good enough.
I'll hook you up.
I'm not, well, but I believe those books are there. But when Google curated all the results to where it was impossible to find the other argument, anytime they tell you that you can't look at the information to decide anything on your own, that is a powerful signal that they are lying to you. Maybe not 100% of the time, but it should certainly push you that direction until proven otherwise. And there's a few things in this world that are unquestionable. If you're not allowed to question them and think on them, that should be a big red flag. That's my thing. I'm not, and just a word out here. I know that some people tend to go all one way or all the other. Like Alan was saying, if there is some, hey, this is a look at the bodies in the street piling up because of this plague. Well, cool. Then maybe there's an actual reason to do that. It's funny, in the same conversation with my dad about the COVID vaccine. Well, why should I take it? And he said, well, why shouldn't you? I'm like, no, that's not what you taught me in 1997. No. And I said, I'm not scared of COVID. And I think what I used was chop it up. I'll do a line of COVID right now. I don't fear COVID. I do fear getting this vaccine. And, that was the logic. It's not trying to rant at you guys about whatever you think. And I would encourage you guys to make the best medical decisions that you can according to your conscience.
I think another great example of, Chesterton's fence being uprooted and relocated based on the influence of those who are trying to undo our civilization, corporate capitalists, is the food pyramid. The food pyramid has destroyed American health. We used to eat the inverted food pyramid, right? Sugar's bad for you, of course, but but like we used to, it was all meat and dairy and eggs, a little bit of fruit, and a side of bread, and that was food. And now so then they came up with this food pyramid, and again, so like Chesterton would say, I think I always envisioned him having a pipe, why should we eat in a different way than our ancestors have been eating for the last 20,000 years? Well, because ConAgra and other Monsanto, similar type corporate interests sponsored these studies that were gamed to show that grain-based diets are better for you. It's totally wrong. It's totally the opposite of what stuff is. I mean, look at again, in the Facebook memes, Facebook pictures that come out, look at a beach picture from the 1960s when people were eating meat and dairy, 3,000 calories a day of bacon and eggs and milk, and everybody's thin. Because that's what our bodies are designed and evolved to run on, is that, that's that kind of fuel. And what do Americans look like now? We're all a bunch of fat slobs, myself included. I have been trying to instill some more discipline in myself lately, but it's not all just because of Pop-Tarts and Captain Crunch, but that had a big contribution. Breakfast is the most important meal of the day. Look, this, Captain Crunch is a delicious part of a nutritious breakfast. All totally bunk, all totally false. But
except the delicious part.
Huh?
I said except the delicious part.
Right. It is delicious. But otherwise, no. Although I do still occasionally eat a Pop-Tart if I can find one laying around loose somewhere. But so we have destroyed ourselves by listening to the science. And so we have to decide for ourselves, what, and we can look at thousands and thousands of years of history, about what it is that works for us. And not everybody can eat dairy and cheese, and I realize cheese is a subset of dairy, but ditto, like where we have infused the Western diet into places like, into the Pacific Islands, and Matt, I know you've had some experience with those guys you talk about, having the guys from Samoa in there, working up in Alaska, and, it has destroyed their health. They've gone from these thin, healthy, lean, muscular guys to being obese. And not all of them. I'm not, it's not everybody, but by and large, they're by and large.
Just large. Very traditional people. They are very well insulated for Arctic climes.
So again, that's just another example of us unwinding thousands of years of cultural practice on a whim because, some well-intentioned but deluded group of progressive morons, I realize that's redundant, came along and said, we should be eating more plant food. It's just baloney. I mean, plant food is not baloney. Plant baloney is crap. Eat real baloney.
Well, and the other thing is worth saying, don't just be an edgelord to be an edgelord. Don't be an extremist to be an extremist. Maybe the fence is in the way and the fence is bad. But go through the process of figuring out why it's there and why everybody before you thought it was just fine. Do you really know something better about the fence? Maybe you do. Chances are you might not, but it's worth thinking about. One of the things, and I harp on this, but this is a big thing about being Aryan. Being noble people implies an ability and an obligation to make decisions, to examine your circumstance, and to make choices about what you are going to do and what you're not going to do with your life. The path of nobility is in the choosing, and it's facing real life situations as an adult and choosing from imperfect choices with educated and informed decision making, and then standing by and handling the consequences of the choices that you make. But it's one of the least sexy aspects of Asatru in practice, but I think one of the most important. No, you have a responsibility to be the adult in the room and to take a degree of ownership for your life. You don't let Jesus take the wheel. You don't let Odin take the wheel. You drive responsibly, and hopefully your driving impresses Odin. That's the hope.
Yeah, don't get me started about driving, because I have a long list of road rage quibbles that that not everybody's okay. Now, I should also go back and iterate that you can be a responsible vegetarian and be lean, but it's a lot of work in my experience, because we were vegan for a while, and it's a lot of work to do that and to get the right nutrition. And if you can do it, great. In fact, I think there is an ethical response about the way that meat animals are treated. They're treated horribly. That's another thing that we should, like as a civilization, we should be kinder to the animals that we eat. They live horrible lives. And, so for some, that in and of itself is a reason to be vegetarian, not because it's wrong to eat meat, but because it's wrong to raise chickens, 60 in a 8x8 crate, that have horrible lives and they're slaughtered horribly. And, I get all that. So we try to eat something that's a little more organic, pasture raised and all that stuff. I realize all the problems with all that terminology, but the eggs that I eat are raised right here in the yard, and those chickens have good lives, relatively speaking.
Another, and we get a little bit further afield on some of these things, it's worth saying. Have the courage to own the reasons why you do things. We live in an age where it is very popular for you to choose an extreme position and then demand that everyone else do the thing you're doing. Because I think sometimes, because misery loves company or whatever, if you are a fat and you are trying to fix it and you are going on a diet, that doesn't mean that everybody else who's in good shape has to be on the same diet as you. You can just pursue a very lean diet because you have gone to a point you need to correct it. I've seen a number of people who have a problem with alcohol. So they've decided they need to be sober. Not only that, they've decided that all the rest of us need to be sober. No, the rest of us haven't messed up our life with alcohol addiction. You need to take responsibility for what you need to do to manage your situation. I think everybody needs to do that. We have a strange thing. If you want to eat poorly because you like it and it tastes good, then say that. If you want to do whatever you're going to do, but we have a tendency instead to pick our own idiosyncrasy and try to force everyone else to do it, whether they need to or not. And I think that extending some grace and having the honesty to say why you do a thing, take ownership of it, and that's part of that adulting there too.
Big time.
So we've got some questions stacking up. I think we got some good questions. first multiple part question, Caleb. Okay, Caleb with a four-parter. Part one, will you be at Odenshoff Midsummer? I will be. Lawspeaker, I assume you will not be. All right. So then a question. Okay. Part two, what is one or two of your favorite things about each Hoff? Alan, at each of the 5 Hoffs, what is one or two things that are your favorite about each?
Yay. Of course, I have to start. First of all, I love Nordhoff community. The people there are beautiful, wonderful. Me too. I think we've got a great community there. I assume that's true everywhere. The rest of the Hoffs, I'm just more familiar with Nordhoff there. I love our grounds. We have 5 acres there that we have some big plans for eventually to do some cool stuff with. We've got 2 pounds of ponds with a live alligator, racing our presence there. So we have a cool place. Then Baldershoff, love you, Brandy. The Baldershoff, I love the Vey in there. I think the mural in there is wonderful. And the steeple I know is under reconstruction. Mailed that check today, by the way, to get that started. But it just looks so much like a sacred place, and it's a cool little town. If I had my druthers, and if the demographics of Murdoch were more like, I would live in White Springs, but that's not going to happen. Odenshoff, I love what has been done in there. I love those big, beautiful doors that took so long. It gives, the Odenshoff has that big, majestic entrance, but I love that big sun wheel in the back. That big worship space back there is just, absolutely awesome. Thorshoff, again, the Vey in there, and the work, not only the mural that Svan did, but all of the rest of the decor in there, where they've done so much work. It just, it really looks, it's really taking on the full appearance of a full-born stave church in there, and just spectacular. And we just got Frasehoff, but that is an awesome worship space in there that's going to be hard to top and then with that big community space down there, I know Cliff and Katie are going to make that into a wonderful and worthy space for the worship of Frey.
So Odenshoff is really powerful. It's our oldest Hoff. It'll be turning 11 this year. The ritual space there, the outdoor Vey, is very powerful, and it's a space that I'm very familiar with and very connected to. It's the Hoff I've done the most ritual at. So it's very special that way. I was also there when we first discovered and did the walkthrough of that property before we had it. So it's very sentimentally important to me. Also, it is a Hoff where I got to meet the 2 people that are interred there, and I, was good friends with Gothi Thorgren. So it being, his final resting place in Midgard is makes it extra special. And it's a place I'm just very, very familiar with and very comfortable at. And the mural there is really powerful. And Odin's one eye in that mural follows you in the Hof in a really special way. Thor's Hof, like a lot, it's the oldest building that we have for one of our Hofs. I think the current building for at least the vase space there dates from 1870s. Svan's first mural, it is particularly powerful in the way that it dominates the space. I absolutely love the feeling of that place there. And it was the first Hof that we got under my administration, which was really special to me in a lot of ways as far as proving the ability to accomplish that, or to I guess, see that to be accomplished. Baldershof is special in a different, like, I'm trying to think of the stuff that I like the best about it. It being in town and having like town walkable around it. It was the first one of our Hofs that have that. And you have that at Jordshof too. But a little bit different way there in Murdoch. The space, you can feel the love that was put into making that place special. I got to see it when it was in the deplorable condition it was when we purchased it. I got to knock down some of the old sheetrock that was in the way, the tiniest little bit for one afternoon, but I got to feel like, hands-on. I was there when it was getting remodeled a little bit, and I got to see where it was and then what it's become due to the hard work by so many of our people, but, chief among them, Speckinger Brandy and Gothi Nate Erlinson, and the people who just put so much love into making that place as powerful as it is, and you can feel it there. There is a spirit to that place that is really special. Also, it kind of is special in a way that it's the one that we had, notable opposition to in the media and misguided people in the community. And it's a way that we've watched that turn around in the community, watched the overcoming of that obstacle, which makes it kind of special in that way. Jordshof, and some of these are personal things, so I don't know if they go on to everybody else. I think it's cool that there's ponds there, one of which has a gator in it. That's awesome. The big live oak with the Spanish moss when you first drive in is just beautiful, and I think is really, really special. Hof I was at most recently, I appreciate the mural more each time I go there. But also, it was a really special thing for me. I had lived in Florida for 2 years. It's where my wife Mandy was born and raised. And when we left Florida to go out to be closer to Odenshof, and that was the only Hof we had, it was one of those things that I wanted consciously when I left to return with a Hof, to show that we could, to make that happen and to have that victory there. And when I came back to Florida for the first time, it was for the dedication of that Hof. And that was personally really significant to me. Frey's Hof's just magnificent. Look at it. So go there. It is, the building itself is, I think perfect overstates it, but it's really ideal in so many ways. The space itself is just fantastic, but the main worship area is amazing. Svan gets better every time with his murals and his skill that he puts into it. The mural of Freyr there is the biggest mural so far, and it's breathtaking. It literally brought me to tears when I saw it the first time. It's amazing. The rest of the altar space, the different altars up there on the dais, and just the whole of that room is amazing, and it's wonderful. Also, Katie does the food there, and she does an amazing job. The meal that I ate there, 2 months ago now, was best meal I've had at a Hoff, so that's a big plus there. So those are mine that I've got. But this is a 4-part question, so we're on to part 3. What is the AFA's stance on sex before marriage? What is ideal and what is practical? So this goes back to the nobility discussion about making good choices. The AFA doesn't have some kind of abstinence before marriage stance. The AFA doesn't have a big stance on sex before marriage. The AFA has a stance on wanting our people to be dignified and wanting our people to make good and responsible choices. And there is an art to that, especially when sex comes into play and the consequences that come along with it. So there is a great deal to be said for discretion and wisdom in figuring that out artfully. I think there is a tendency by those in our circles to want us to have a particularly prudish stance. And I don't think that's appropriate, even though, it's tempting to go with that. But I do think an honest stance is also necessary in there. So yeah, there's no great AFA doctrine on sex before marriage, but the responsibility of dealing with that and dealing with the consequences of it, I think we could talk an entire show easily about. What is ideal? I think ideal is that our families are raised together in a faith community, and you have people that have grown up knowing each other and families that have grown up knowing each other. And you have people who are both 18 that are magically in love with each other and have found the perfect partner, and they stay with that partner for the rest of their life and raise, many healthy, beautiful white babies. I think that that's a whole lot of variables that are unlikely to all hit at the same time, but I think trending towards that gets us closer to the ideal. Alan, what are your thoughts on these things?
I agree with what you said. We have some work to do to correct the errant path that we are on overall. Along that line, I would just say, although of course, it's not the last word on these sorts of things ever, but in Germanica, it wasn't Caesar. Who was it? Anyway, when the Romans were trying unsuccessfully to conquer the German peoples, they noted that chastity was greatly valued among the German tribes, and for a good reason.
So I'll say this on what's not ideal. What is not ideal is for you to find yourself in a spot where you have children that you have no custody or shared custody of. That is a horrible place to be most of the time. It's a less than ideal place to be all of the time. But I've seen a lot of heartbreak by people who have not been thoughtful in their premarital sexual expression and have found themselves with children that they don't get to see or have say in their life, or to where they kind of have to half borrow their own children and are in a 20-year struggle with a person who hates them, with kids in the balance that really don't get what we would want for them in terms of family and upbringing. Trying to avoid that situation by some caution, I think, is very advisable.
At the same time, we also recognize that in this modern era, especially where traditionalism is trying to gain a new foothold in awash in a sea of anti-traditionalism, and especially, a man or a woman who, gets in to a marriage with the best intention, and then one or the other of them finds their way to a more traditionalist viewpoint. It's difficult to hold that together. And there's no easy answer for that. And I don't want any member or anybody watching to think that, that because, the way that your life has worked out, that there's, that is anything, that's any kind of judgment against you, because it's not. We understand and know, sometimes from personal experience, that we live in chaotic, turbulent time, and it's not easy to do anything up along that line. We can talk about the ideal and frame it in that way, and we can then try to project the various permutations from that, what's the next best choice and the next best choice, but it's also true that sometimes, like if you get married to some guy and he turns out to be a weenie, then, you kick him to the curb and find a good man.
Yeah, life's messy. And that's part of the Aryan theme I mentioned of being the adult and having to choose between imperfect choices. And some things just are, and we can get mad that they are, but we know that they're biological truths and there's reasons for them. Men are judged harshly by lack of sexual partners, and women are judged harshly by abundance of sexual partners. And those things are at cross purposes, especially in young people's lives if we're talking about premarital situations. Both of those things are true, and those are difficult challenges for our young people to face, for all of our people to face in some circumstances. So again, a certain amount of discretion and a certain amount of wisdom and making wise choices is good in those scenarios. For the fourth part of the question, which of your bumper stickers causes the most concern for people outside of the AFA? I'm going to assume that is like your personal bumper stickers. Alan, what personal bumper stickers do you have that cause the most concern for people outside of the AFA?
I don't think, what I display now is subtle. So I don't, I've never had anybody be concerned. Sorry, wait, there is an exception that I'm gonna get around to. But, what I have, like on my vehicles, I have, like a walk nut. Although it's in its proper orientation, everywhere on the rune stones where the valk nut is displayed, it's not with the point up, but with the point down and left. So my valk nut is in the proper orientation, and I have mead horns and, ravens and that sort of thing. And so, like, for the most part, people have no idea what that stuff is. And honestly, part of it is because in my car ends up parked outside my professional office, and I want to keep the amount of controversy below the minimum. However, the one that I won't say it causes a problem, but the one that draws the most attention is, I have a peace sign on my truck, but I have it right side up. And I mean, that's an easy thing to goad people with, because, the peace sign, if you put it right side up, it's the Augie's rune. So, I've been stopped in traffic and had people ask me, why is your peace sign upside down? And again, I've got an elevator speech for that. And they go, you mean they've been lying to us about that the whole time? They sure have. So that's one of those things that can, inspire attention and thoughtfulness among people. And it doesn't mean war exactly, the opposite of, although we are at war with the anti-traditionalists, and I'm happy to own that.
I don't have any bumper stickers. And I haven't gotten any negative feedback.
To be fair, you may not have a bumper sticker, but you do have a car that says Prius on it. That's bad enough.
So people dislike my Prius, but I really like my gas savings. So, there's a cost for that. I have a Sons of Confederate Veterans license plate that I'm sure some people who are, wrongly aligned dislike. I've also, because in Tennessee you don't have to have a front plate, I've got a Confederate battle flag front plate on my Prius, which also I'm sure some people dislike, but that's their problem. Nobody's said anything to me about it.
Yeah, I had a Confederate battle flag front plate for years and years and years. I still have it in the shop, but then I I had a client of mine make me and I've got that Thor's hammer front plate now, and with an American flag motif, and I got him to make 6 or 8 of them and sold them all.
Random fun guy. Looking at his wiki article, why did Stephen McNallen do a sort of neo-Nazi purge during the free assembly days? I've got answers and thoughts on this, but Alan, do you have any insight on this?
I don't. After I joined, I never dug into the history of all that stuff. And, when I joined, back in the 1830s, there's just, that this stuff wasn't all that available. I mean, there wasn't all that much on the internet. I joined because Mr. McNallen and his aura resonated with me. And I said, this is a guy I can get behind and support. The past is prologue, and here we are.
So it's a much misunderstood saga. There were a number of things that contribute to it, but the problem is it's been thrown around as an ideological football in different places. So people who are strongly opposed to quote unquote neo-Nazis are like, aha, Steve's our guy because he purged these evil neo-Nazis. See, he's virtuous. And so that has ridden as a narrative for a time. People who are inclined to be pro quote unquote neo-Nazis are offended and think, there's some kind of a counter signaling, or, he's one of the bad guys because he doesn't like the neo-Nazis. The truth of the matter is a lot more nuanced. And I'll say this. I think that circumstances in life help shape a person's ideology over the course of decades. I think that certainly in the free assembly days, Steve was racially aware. He was certainly folkish and understood that Asatru was folkish. And I think politically he would have been best described as libertarian, or certainly of the libertarian kind of stripe that way. So I don't think it was out of some kind of, love of lefty universalism in any way. But he has gotten more, I would say he's moved to the right over the last few decades. I think that, the circumstances in his life and things that he's been through and learned have helped shape who he is today in a way that is a bit different. But at the time, there was a couple of things. It wasn't because, some well-dressed, socially well-adept people with National Socialist leanings had politics in the group that he didn't like. That's not a fair assessment. There were two currents going on in Asatru Free Assembly events at the time. And I don't claim this to be all end all. This was all happening when I was probably in elementary school. But this is what I've gleaned in my historical studies on it and trying to get to the bottom of it. There was there's the intellectual National Socialists, and then there's the dress up Nazi, more skinhead type of activist at the time. There were people at events that were showing up, being very loud and abrasive and sometimes dangerous, just being thuggish. That was a problem that was alienating a lot of people. The Free Assembly saw Renaissance fair nerds and eclectic, odd, fatty orgy Wiccan pagans getting together with hardcore racist neo-Nazi groups and everybody in between, and kids that like to play Dungeons and Dragons, and legitimate historians and people who were interested in history and everything in between. It was a time of coalescing where people from literally every possible degree of the spectrum would try to come together, see where they fit in, or if they didn't fit in, clashes were happening. But there was an element there that was doing that. There was also an element there that was trying to make everything a dress-up Nazi event. And I think that we use the term dress-up Nazi means different things. I mean, literally in reenactment SS uniforms to do all of their stuff. And agree or disagree with that, it wasn't what Asatru was about. They were trying to make it about their dress-up Nazi stuff. But also there was going on specifically in Los Angeles at the time, there were folks that were largely atheists that were consciously trying to use Asatru as a cover for National Socialist political activism instead of being at the event to practice Asatru. And so I think that it was a coalescing of those things, of Steve being like, hey, you guys aren't here for the right reasons. If you're not here to worship the gods, don't be here. Hey, if you guys can't act right and stop being rowdy and acting up, you can't be here. And I think that happened to affect the people that were most affected at the time. Oh, Steve doesn't like us because we're neo-Nazis. No, he doesn't like you because you're socially disruptive and because you guys are atheists and aren't here to worship the gods. You guys are here to yell about politics. I mean, that's what had happened. That's the best I've come to understand. And we've tried to do a lot of, Chris has helped with that too. Chris Savage, who is co-host on here periodically, trying to research our history and get that history recorded. And I think all of those things go into play into that narrative that he had some kind of neo-Nazi purge. I think it's largely try to clean up disruptive elements and elements that weren't there, and that happened to be a point of commonality they had. That's the best I understand.
I think that, again, I know very little about it, but that seems to be, I'm sure that's an accurate assessment. And it's a good time to wedge in here too, that there's a certain stripe of progressivism that fits well with our tribalism. It's so, which is to say that Asatru is not about politics. It is about traditionalism in large part, and religion, of course, but also a traditionalist approach to religion, but also a traditionalist approach to meta-political issues like the direction of the civilization, the direction of the culture, and how that's expressed certainly doesn't fit neatly into the false dichotomy of blue and red politics. So we don't take political stance. We are not a political organization at all. At the same time, by and large, we because we take a traditionalist viewpoint, we tend to be a much more conservative group overall. But like at some point, those circles meet, like on the other side, like libertarianism. You can be a right libertarian, left libertarian. You can be a sort of a progressive traditionalist, I guess. In fact, I just finished listening to a book by a guy who I was agreeing with 1,000% till he got like to the very end and talked about, that like politically he's this super lefty, but it does go to show that a lot of the analysis and we can agree on a lot of the things that are wrong with the direction that civilization is headed in, and disagree about some other stuff and still be under the umbrella of the gods and the ancestors.
So I'll say this as an example to people in the chat, like, don't get it wrong. I do not have any reason to believe it was about National Socialism. It was about people trying to come to AFA events, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, we get it, instead of talking about Asatru. Hey, join, I don't want to pick a group if I don't know they were the ones doing it. But here, join my political party that I'm doing. In the same way, we have had people in the past show up who, Asatru, whatever. Anyway, here, join my chapter of the Klan. That's not what we're doing. You're not even Asatru. You're just here trying to recruit for the Klan, and that's not what we're doing. And that's kind of the situation. If you had people there at the same time and they were wearing three-corner hats and yelling about libertarianism, at some point you're like, hey guys, how about we don't, and we talk about Odin and we do bloat instead? No, I was here to, talk about sovereign citizens and stuff. No, that's not what we're doing. So at some point it's about that, or it's about whatever your politics. If you're drunk and loud and obnoxious and people can't get any sleep or have the kids around, let's not do that. So I think that's what a lot of that was around. Again, that was kind of a wild time of not a lot of group cohesion. There was a lot of that still forming then. From Gilbert, good evening. Alzheri Gothian Lawspeaker. I believe one of the major effects and goals of AFA membership is an increased in-group cohesion. Peter Turchin's asabaya, or in other terms, folkishness. How can we help build this folkishness in others, both within the church and without? Thank you, gentlemen, for everything you do for our gods, our folk, and our church. Well, thank you, Gilbert. Alan, are you familiar with Peter Turchin? Are you familiar with the concept of asabaya? And can you talk about how our faith community relates to that concept?
Ooh, boy. So it's my fault that Mr. Page has become familiar with that terminology and with Peter Turchin because he listened to a book that I recommended to him. Asabaya was specifically, and I may be, because I read a lot. So what that term is about is group cohesiveness. Okay, and specifically, it's about civilization being attacked by the barbarian outsider. And so and it comes up in Oswald Spengler, although he doesn't use the term. Turchin is the one who came up with the term, which I believe, although I'm 2 books out from The Prophets of Doom, which again is an excellent book, by the way, The Prophets of Doom. But I believe it was an Arabic term, because what they're talking about there is like, when a civilization is young and full of vim and vigor, there's a different phraseology that I won't use, but full of vim and vigor and is in its conquering, expansive, youthful stage, it goes out and, absorbs the surrounding peoples and countryside into its sphere of influence. But then the peoples at the edge that don't quite get conquered develop a sense of, in this term, asabaya, or cohesiveness, and Gilbert said, folkishness, like, so in, like, if you want to think of it, it is widely true that this phenomenon occurs between, like, the city and the country, between the city and the rural, because you come to, like, the civilization conquers, and the warriors go out and make this big buffer zone, and then they sort of retract to the city and become comfortable and wealthy and become soft and lazy, and that's what happened to Rome, although it took several hundred years. Some would say 1,000 years, because Byzantium was really the end of the Roman Empire, and that didn't get conquered until like the 1600s, right? 1500s. Anyway, so but those outer groups develop a group cohesion because they are opposed to the control being levied against them by the central authority. Okay, so just like the German tribes remained unconquered because they kept their asabaya, they kept their folkishness, and they said, we will not fall under the domain of the Romans. And so they came together to eliminate the legions who in Teutoburg Forest and remained free. It also happened, like when the Moors conquered and occupied Spain, and you have to have that sense of history to remember, and certainly it wasn't taught to me. I had to read it, later on, because what passes for history in schools is not. But anyway, it's not education. But anyway, like the Spanish didn't reconquer Spain until the 1490s. So think about that. It was, Spain, a traditionally European, had been hundreds of thousands of years, had been, the Celto-Aryan people. And then Christianity came and you know what, and they were, of course, Catholic for a long time. And then the Muslims came along and conquered almost all of Spain. And it took hundreds of years, the Reconquista, because those last few Spanish peoples coalesced, retained their group cohesion, and finally, after a long and bitter and bloody struggle, kicked the Muslims out of Spain. So, you know, and that, I believe, is what Gilbert's talking about, you know, and I think that we of the AFA are out at the tip of the spear of regaining and or retaining our group cohesion as a people, that that this is who we are, this is why we are, and we don't care if you like it or not. And I'll say it again because I like my little trite bumper sticker sayings. You know, when it's us versus them, I take us every time, and that's what that term is about.
Yeah, I've never heard of Peter Turchin, or if I have, I didn't associate him with it. I first encountered that concept or that term Vasabaya with Ibn Khaldun. And again, he was during that Reconquista time. I remember I had to learn about him and came in contact with that when I was on the debate team in high school, because he had some relevant quotations that I was using. Yeah, what Alan said, but I think to add on to it, and we see it in its small stages right now. We are building on it in what, I don't know, old man wisdom. Since I turned 40, I've got old man wisdom. If you're around something long enough, you get to see how something has progressed over time. And I think that when people encounter the AFA, they have to compare it with the image they had in their mind. When people come in underestimating it, they're overwhelmed by how amazing we are, how far we've come, the fact that we have 5 Hoffs, how well we're doing. Other people who, you know, don't have that context and assume like, surely there's a Hoff, you know, in my town. Where's my closest Hoff? You know, they're dismayed because they have an expectation in their mind. And it's beautiful that we have shaped enough in the world to where we project that that's where we're at, to where people are crestfallen, that surely there'd be a Hoff, at least 3 Hoffs in each state. It's cool that the psychological impact makes that well, of course there would be. But for many of us, you know, I talked about our oldest Hoff. It's 11 years old this year. Many of us came up in this when that wasn't there. We've come a long way towards building that in-group culture and cohesion. And that provides a tremendous base of strength for our members. And we all want to see that grow and continue to develop as the years go on and the generations go on. And I think that those of us who've been here for a decade or more have seen how well that's taken root and how well that's growing. So I think we're absolutely doing the right things, but to continue that. Everyone out there who may be hearing this that might be sitting on the fence, it's like, I support you guys 100%, but I just don't want to join. I appreciate the thought. That also equals supporting us 0%. Join, be a member, be part of actually supporting us and being part of what we do. If you're on the fence, get off the fence, get on the team. We're doing this, and you're doing this with us accelerates our progress and how well we can build that in-group focusness. I am a unique case in my position, and I don't take that for granted, but my entire life is wrapped in this. My friendships, the people that I have deep connection with over the years, over the decades. I have this whole life built within the AFA, and an increasing number of our people have that. They have friends and family that span across the continent and at different points around the world that are AFA members that they know, that they have connection with, that they have shared faith, shared bonds of culture, shared tradition, and have that internal bond. We are building that in a really strong way. And the more you choose to get involved, you will see that develop and take root over the years. And many of us have built families specifically around that and from that and born of that. I met my wife through the AFA. We have built the AFA into our life. Our daughter has known the Asatru Folk Assembly since the day she was born, since her Asavatni, since growing up playing in the yards of our hofs and building that in a fundamental part of her DNA. We're building that all the time around us, and you don't notice it until you step away and you look in, or you take note of like where you were and where it's come, because it's a slow build over time, but it's a strong one. And I think we're doing the right things that way. And I'm excited to see that continue to grow and take shape and be palpable to the membership. And I think it does now in a way that it greater than it ever has before. Caleb asks, could someone who is fully aware of Asatru but rejects it for Christianity be hailed at Sumbel? Alan, do you want to take the first swing at that?
I can, but the answer is yes. If they are a worthy person who has done good things and stands with their folk, and I have no qualms at all about it. Of course, my dad was an atheist, I guess, and my mother's a devout Christian, but at the same time, they didn't know about Asatru. So I understand the import of the question, but I would still say, that in the open round of oaths, toasts, and boasts, that it was, that it's a valid expression.
See, I think that the devil is really in the details. People ask on here a related question, but the difference to me is knows about Asatru but chooses to reject it for Christianity. It depends on what that means. Your friend who you told about Asatru, but they are a confirmed Christian and remain so until their death, sure. If your friend was Asatru and he turns his back on our gods to pursue Christianity, then I would say no. Both of those people are aware of Asatru and reject it for Christianity, but the difference is really important. We get asked on here a lot, well, what do I do? My ancestors haven't been Asatru for 1,000 years. Should we not honor them? You should honor every generation of them except the first one who turned his back on his gods and embraced Christ. That person I'd never mention. That person lives in infamy because they betrayed their gods. If you aren't in troth with the Aesir and you stay loyal to the thing that you are in troth with, that's real different than you breaking your troth with the Aesir to prostitute yourself to a foreign god. Those are two different things. And that's where I think the nuance is. There's lots and lots of people we hail at Sumbel who are not Asatru. There's lots of our own family members that we hail at Sumbel that know that we're Asatru and don't make the decision to join us in being Asatru. And I think those people are fine to hail at someone. But people who reject Asatru, who were in trough with the gods and then break that trough and don't return to it, I don't think those people should be celebrated in Sabur. But it's a nuanced thing, and that's a really important detail. So Mary says Asatru is the folk religion of potato Europe, while the people of tomato Europe have the Greek and Roman gods and goddesses. Comments. Alan, what are your comments?
I mean, I get what she's getting at. Interesting that both the potato and the tomato are New World foods, both import, so at the same time, I know what she's getting at. But but those are differences of degree and not of kind. The Greco-Roman panoply is very much the same as the Norse panoply. The Indo-European people manifested that in slightly different ways, and I'm not super conversant on the which one represents, like Mars, because when the Caesars were conquering or tried to conquer the German tribes, they saw very close analogies to, between Mars and Thor, for example. And so that, so those are differences of degree and not of kind. There are heroic gods who smash the forces of chaos and protect their own people. So, and plus, you put some tomatoes in your potatoes and you got some good eating going on there. So, we can, that's the kind of multiculturalism I can get behind.
Yeah, I think it misses a fundamental truth that is not perfectly divisible. So it is uncomfortable to try to rack our brains on, but we also know is true. Our gods are real. Them being real gods and not sociological constructs or literary characters, they didn't just appear at different points of time in history when someone first wrote something down. You can trace etymologically and culturally their worship back to shared and common roots. If these are the gods that created us and shaped us and imbued us with the divine spark that makes us who we are, then they've been with us since the beginning of our race. We know that the Hellenes and the Latins and the Germanics were one people at the beginning of our race. So they came from certain gods. The development of our understanding of those gods looks very different by the time some of our folk are in the Mediterranean and some of our folk are on the North Sea. Either version of that is an acceptable way of worshiping the Aryan gods. But certainly in 2026, the gods have shown favor to one expression of that in a way that is above the others. And I think if we were having this discussion in Rome or in Greece, it might look really different. I think if those people are pursuing Hellenism or whatever they want to call, Latin version of Hellenism, I think that's fine. I think that's great and that's pious, and I think that's fantastic. But I think we would all be better off as a united race of Aryan peoples to worship the gods under the banner of Asatru in the conception that has worked, that has given us the best and most accessible corpus of lore, and importantly, the names and conception that have been whispered into the ear of our founder, Steve McNallen, by the All-Father himself, to put this that we do in motion in the most successful way in the world. That's where we should be, whether your ancestors come from potato or tomato Europe. I think that we're all better served if we're all practicing Asatru. So the next question comes from Austin. Greetings all. Hope you are having a great evening. On more than one occasion, members have responded negatively to AI-generated flyers for AFA events when I send them out. I'm sure there are many more members, or there are more members that have a problem with AI flyers and don't tell anyone. While I try to limit AI in my work, I can understand if others want to use it to save time, but some members seem to think it's a kind of moral failing or something. Do you think these members might have a valid point? What are your thoughts on using AI for AFA-related things and people just using it in general? Thanks for all you do. Alan, what are your thoughts on using AI-generated design for flyers?
I think it's fine, because to use AI to say, draw me generate me a picture of some Vikings sitting around the dinner table. I don't have the artistic ability to do that. I mean, every flyer I've ever done back, 100 years ago when I was a folk builder, it's all just a text, which is, it's bland and boring, but it just says, we're doing this at this point, because I don't have that, that flair for that sort of stuff. I'm all about some vocabularistics, I see absolutely nothing wrong with it to the extent that it enhances, just the publicizing of the event. I wouldn't suggest that we should let the AI go out, pick me a date and a restaurant and do the whole thing for us. But, as far as enhancing a flyer so that it is more eye-catching, now, at the same time, I understand like the objection to that is, AI is eating the world as part of the machine. So, to the extent that we are contributing to the downfall of all that sort of stuff, if that's the objection, I sort of understand it, but, that seems to me to be just, the part of that purity spiral that we all get in sometimes. And, for some it's objectionable, but for some it enhances the beauty and attention that the flyer and that the underlying event deserve. So, do what seems right to you would be my suggestion.
Yeah, I think these people are drastically overreacting, and I think they're being silly when it comes to that on flyers. That's dumb. I could pretend it's not, but truth is one of our virtues. AI art, like art, if you were, hey, I painted this by telling AI what to put on there, that's not really art. It may be a design concept that AI helped you with, but it's different. Having AI write you a song or AI compose you a poem, I think some of those things take away from art. But this isn't art. This is you trying to make a quick flyer that's visually appealing And I think that everybody knows that. You're not trying to trick them or pass anything off. And if a member objects, do they have a hand-drawn flyer they would like to present to you to use instead? If they do, and I say that as a flex, like, cool, you want to draw one? What? But if they come back, hey, here's this beautiful one I drew for you. Sure, use that one. Go for it. Awesome. No, AI is a tool that is increasingly useful. For us to not use it puts us at an unnecessary disadvantage. There are certainly going to be many occasions where it would be inappropriate, but to navigate what is a good use of it when it's necessary, no, we need to be on the cutting edge of using all of the tools necessary, as long as they do not do something morally intolerable for our folk, to advance us and move us forward. Our ancestors were noted for doing that. They were at the tip of technology, and they wouldn't shun using things outside of their sphere or that their ancestors didn't use in order to be more effective at their goals. Efficacy matters. And tying hands behind your back for no good reason because somebody's purity spiraling because they want to use Microsoft Paint or whatever they're used to using, I don't see that as a moral argument. And I also don't see a dishonesty as if you're going to claim that you hand drew it and it was generated by AI, then yeah, your deception is morally reprehensible. But if you're not trying to fool anybody, I don't think it's inappropriate at all. I think you're doing the best you can to make visually appealing stuff, and that's fun. Some of my flyers would use AI, but I'm not bright enough to know how to do that. So that's where I'm at. But I appreciate you asking, and I'm sure it'll come up on a variety of things as those kind of lines get blurred more and more by AI.
No, but I think that's a great point. If anybody raises an objection, then you ask them, okay, the next time I do it, we can work together. We can work together and put together a flyer that you can do the art and I'll do the place, and we'll meet and talk about it. So that's a great co-option there.
There you go. There you have it. This one's just for you, Alan. Lawspeaker Alan Turnage. What is your favorite comfort food?
I hate to say it, not ice cream. As far as and I hesitate to even. Now, I have found a new favorite brand of ice cream as in general, which is Blue Bunny ice cream, because it doesn't have all that goop in it. It melts into liquid and not into goop like other ice cream does. And I hesitate to admit it because of their politics, but I love me some Ben & Jerry's New York Fudge Super Chunk. So if anybody is wondering what to get me for Yule, a big freezer full of New York Fudge Super Chunk.
I'm surprised Alcirgothi hasn't got you on that Ninja Creamy game yet.
On what?
Okay, so I'm going to plug another product, though they don't pay me, and they should. The Ninja Creamy ice cream maker thingy, and there's a bunch of recipes that you can make protein ice cream in there. And again, I'm typically not that guy. Those recipes that are like, oh, it's kind of good, I'd rather eat real ice cream and then just cram down protein shake that's disgusting. I want to shoot it and get it done as fast as I can. I don't like the half measure thing that tricks you into thinking it's good. No, this ice cream is honestly really good. It's extremely friendly to your macros. It's awesome. I don't. I have Mandy make for me like chocolate mint that I put mint chocolate chunks in. I have her make chocolate protein ice cream that I put little mini M&Ms in. and all of it comes out really good, really macro friendly. Each pint of it, I'm getting like 50 grams of protein. It's awesome. When Mandy has made them for me, I will eat, several in a sitting, and it's all good. It keeps me on track, and it's tasty. But yeah, ice cream's awesome, be it healthy or not healthy ice cream.
I make up for that I make my own Gatorade, so I can have commercial ice cream.
I also do not like Ben nor Jerry, and I'm ashamed to admit that I do enjoy their products if one finds its way to me, though I cannot bring myself to purchase them. But if someone hands them to me, I will enjoy them. Cherry Garcia was a favorite growing up. I haven't had Cherry Garcia in a long time. I could go for some right now, honestly.
I just finished some like 2 nights ago.
Jealous. Troubled guest. I have some questions. 1, why did Steve McNallen step down? And 2, can you tell me all your thoughts, if any, on the goddess Hecate? Alan, what you want to take the first shot at those two?
The Greek panoply I'm so unfamiliar with. I'm not even positive who Hecate is, because I am focused entirely in my practice and diligence on, in our own Norse gods. As far as the first, that's a long and complicated thing. I think after Steve had been at it for, like 40 odd years at that point, he had just reached the point where he felt like he had pushed, he had rolled the boulder as far as he could. And it was just time to pass the torch.
I also have, I wish I had some, long scholarly answer. My familiarity with Greek goddesses is limited. I think that her, as Fawn's favorite thing to say, her tripartite nature is interesting. I think her similarity to Odin in her relationship with death and like crossroads and like liminal spaces is interesting, but I couldn't say I have a lot of detailed thoughts to give you on that. As far as Steve stepping down, he finally stepped down in 2016, but when I first met him in 2010, he announced that he was gonna be stepping down sometime soon. So I think it was the result of a lot of processes going on. I think, he'd done this for his entire adult life at that point, and I think there was probably a lot of baggage that comes with that. I think there was various, personal reasons. I think there was also a desire to explore some different things with his time as far as political things or writing endeavors that I know he wanted to do. There's a number of things, but he was talking about making that transition since like literally the first time I heard it was the day that I met him in 2010. So it was something kind of long talked about and planned to, and I think a number of things built up that way. And I think something else is true, kind of like Alan said. I think that his inspiration for what he wanted to do and what he could do, he'd kind of moved things as far that direction as he had the drive or the inspiration or the inclination to do, and he felt like it was time to pass the torch. He had mentioned one time a quote, he didn't mention as a quote, I am quoting him, that he didn't want, as he aged, for the AFA to calcify with him. And so I think, there is something to that for whatever reasons he felt that way. But if you would like to come to Midsummer at Odenshoff, you could ask him, and he may have a more in-depth and better answer than we've got for you. All right. Do you have prayer lines / lists like Christians do when someone is sick or in need?
I know we do. Is the circle of air, is that still active? You're muted.
So I prayer lines or lists, I'm not sure what that refers to. We have the circle of air. We have a thing where our ladies, led by our Githyer, do prayers when somebody is in bad health. And we try to keep them abreast of what members are going through, what stuff, so that they can do various rites and prayers to beseech the gods and the various spirits to help them and to heal them. And I know that's been an ongoing thing. I know that we've had at various times we've had different healing rituals where we've been called upon as Gothar to perform a healing rite for people who are in ill health. We've done that in like a ritual sense away from the person. We've also had Gothar go in and minister to people who are in the hospital to try to help in that healing process. So, I'm not one of the ladies, so I haven't been involved in the circle there other than to refer people to that. I have performed healing rites, and I have gone and tried to be of help to people who've been in the hospital, though. Alan, have you had any of those experiences or anything you want to add on
that? No, not personally, but I also know that in Sumbul, air is called upon many times with healing directed at specific members who are, who are in need of healing. So in addition to Circle of Air, which is very much, I think, in keeping with the, that Christian idea of, it's a parallel, not on all fours, obviously, but it parallels the, the prayer list. But it's certainly done in Sumbul as well.
For those who have turned their backs on Asatru, what is a good ritual to pray that they come back to their senses? Alan?
There is the ritual of alcohol intake, the ritual of bribing them with many beers. Other than, a ritual clubbing, nothing comes immediately to mind. And I think, some kidding aside, one of the things that I believe in the hierarchy of our tradition is reaching these questions within the chain of authority or within the chain of command, if you will. So like so if I were faced with that, I would try to formulate a ritual where offerings are made to the Disseer, to your guardian spirits to ask your ancestors to influence their ancestors, because I honestly believe that that those sorts of things, like my morning prayer, involves an invocation to my grandfathers and my grandmothers, and but lesser so to the gods. Like the gods are out there fighting ice giants, and they're out on the periphery, maintaining the balance in the world between order and chaos. So you want to try to keep these things, it seems to me, at the at the proper level of involvement. Like if your electricity goes out, you don't call your senator, you call the city councilman. So so if you want to try to influence a friend, an erstwhile brother, to come to you, like have your grandmother talk to his grandmother. That's so I would try to imagine a ritual that brings that to the fore.
I think that's solid advice. One thing that I would think, needs to be said is anytime you are reaching out in prayer, be it to your ancestors, to the gods, whatever it might be, if you're asking them for something that you have no hand in, that there's nothing for you to do, and you're helpless and you want some help from the other side, okay. But if it's something that you have the ability to affect yourself, it would be improper for you not to be doing those things as well. And I would never want to cut you off from praying also. But like if you know someone who has turned their back on our gods and you want them to reconnect, I think reaching out to your ancestors is a good idea. I will say this. I have always been one to reach out directly to the gods on most things. And I'm not saying that's the right way to go. It's just how I've grown in Asatru. But again, I think scope matters. I think a general, beseeching the gods to help and this person open their eyes or come to their senses is a nice thing to do. I don't think us prescribing you like, say this thing 5 times and turn around in a circle and whatever. I think, and I've always been an advocate for more prayer directly from the heart, and you just asking respectfully for the thing that you want, or even affirming an intention that you want in front of your altar in the sight of the gods is helpful. But it's also helpful while you're doing that to make sure you have extended that effort towards that person. You've tried to talk sense into them. You've, even said like, hey, I'll be praying for you or whatever, but that you're also doing your part. I think that has the best chance of success when the prayer is a force multiplier of what you're doing, as opposed to you asking for them, be it the ancestors or the gods, to do it for you. So make sure you're doing your part as well. But I think any of those are fine. I think Alan's point about going to the ancestors first is probably a very valid thing to do on that. But anything that you're doing, whenever you're praying for anything, make sure you're doing it reverently and respectfully, and make sure that you are putting in the effort on your part where it's available to make that thing happen.
And ply them with alcohol.
That helps. So joking aside, we have a social aversion, and it is easy to ask the gods to do it for you because it's awkward. face the awkward, like, hey, let's you and I sit down and have some drinks and hash this out and talk it over. And, you know, Alan, it's said in a joking way, but not really. The term in vino veritas was originally used to apply to our Germanic ancestors and our customs of drinking, often heavily, when having those kind of conversations, because it tears down those awkwardness walls. And, in vino veritas, from lying truth, if you're sitting there and you guys do have a conversation in that kind of an environment, you can get to the heart of the problem in a way that is more challenging without the aid of that situation. So it's something worth considering. How does one get in trough with the gods?
Well, I think asking the question is a perfect first step. There's no wrong way. There may be a wrong way. I couldn't conceive one, but if you, as Matt said, if you seek sincerely, then the gods will find you. There are certainly lots and lots of books out there that will give you some intellectual understanding of what we do and why we do it. But you don't have to read any of that stuff. I mean, and I'll say that on our website, runestone.org, in our library, we have some very simple rituals that where you just ask the gods to show themselves to you, and it's not like the blue cloaked wanderer is going to knock at your door in the next few minutes. But if you seek with sincerity and persistence, then the gods and the ancestors will clear a path so that you can find what you need when you need it. There are lots and lots of good books out there. Steve's book, Asatru and Native European Spirituality. Edred's book, Our Truth, is also an excellent resource. There's some other stuff that I like that are harder to find, but that have some good explanations out there for some of the concepts. But, and of course, another strong way to come into the gravitational pull, into the orbit of the gods, is to come to the Hof. Come to the nearest Hof event. Even if it's a day's travel for you, and I realize that it's that can be a lot to ask of people, but come and talk to us. I mean, Cliff, Svan, Daniel, Matt, Sheila, Steve, me, Trent, all the Gothar. That's what we're there for. So come to a Hof event, and as Matt was saying earlier, this is a big part of our lives. I work to support my Asatru habit. So, man, you get us started, and I didn't mean to leave anybody out. I didn't go through the whole list because, even John Rock's a decent guy most of the time. But ask us, and especially after you've kind of done it for a while. And again, when you explore some of the folk ways too, leaving some cream out for the house troll, pouring mead out to your land whites. Those are the sorts of things that, it's all one thing, right? It's like, yes, the gods are critically important, but all of these things are part of the folkway. And I will repeat, as I sometimes do, that I really try to think of myself, and I'm getting to that point. Like, there's an essay from several years ago that talks about how difficult it is to come from a place of Christianity and then penetrate through that place of lack of faith and to believe in the gods again. So that characterization was that we believe in believing in the gods, and that's the start. That's coming to the door. I want to believe, and then you open the door, and you walk around in here, and you accumulate all these practices and folkways and beliefs and system to the point now I can honestly say I think that I am the folk and I live the way, right? Actually, Asatru is not something I practice. Asatru is something I am. And, and if it takes you 15 years to get there like it did me, then, but you got to get started.
So I think that's a really interesting question, and I want to come at it from a real different, I don't know, maybe different place, but certainly everything that Alan said is absolutely true. I think you are built on your most basic blood and bone level to be true to the Aesir. People talk about converting to Asatru, but you don't convert to Asatru. You revert to Asatru. Asatru is your default setting. We often make things much more complicated than we need to. And one of the, we relate, and our relation to the gods is one of relationship. Forgive the redundancy there, but we know how to do that. How do you get in troth with the gods? Well, how would you get in troth with a person, with a friend, with a spouse or a lover, with a king? How would you get in troth with that? Troth means loyalty to, or in loyal service to, in a relationship between a man and a god. So how do you do that? Well, there's a pathway to that, we all know. First, you introduce yourself, and you, like Alan said, you have to open the door of wanting to have that sincere belief. And then you pursue that. And you can make a declaration of loyalty, certainly, but you don't, from day one, like, hey, I'm super loyal. All right, cool. Tomorrow we're good. I'm in full trough, super loyal, loyalest guy in the world. It's an intention, a communicating of that intention, and then the living out that intention for a period of time. And that's, sounds overly simple, but that's because it is very simple. Now, there's many, many things you can do to enhance that experience and to do better with it, or to learn more about it, or to, optimize that. But first and foremost, I would come before your altar, come before the gods, and introduce yourself, make an offering, and just, hey, I'm here and I'm listening. And, wherever you're at, an honest assessment of where you're at, and that you want to live true to them. And work on that. Work on making offerings and prayers, and worshiping the gods, participating in that gift cycle, and being open to hear them experience their response and their part in that gift cycle. When it is honest and heartfelt, declare your devotion to them, and then live in a way that's true to your word and your intention over time. Surrounding yourself with other Asatru is a big part of that. Attending the Hofs if you're able, doing bloat with other Asatru, making that effort, is a huge part of that. It's a lived experience over time that proves out the loyalty that you profess or the loyalty that you want to have. And I think that it's really that it starts that simply. You can add to it indefinitely, but those fundamentals are really, really important. And the other thing I want to say is you can't study your way into trough with the gods. If you don't participate in the gift cycle and you don't worship the gods and you don't pray to the gods, you're not Asatru. You can be a scholar about Asatru. You can read every book about Asatru. But the professor of military history isn't Napoleon. He can be an expert about Napoleon, but Napoleon conquered Europe on horseback as a general. That's a different thing. You can be an expert on football. It's not the same as being a quarterback on an NFL team and playing football. You can be an expert about our faith and never actually practice it. And there's a lot of people that never get out of the research and development phase of their experience adjacent to Asatru. You can never have read a book about the lore in your life and approach our gods, your gods, with sincerity, with worship, and you are more Asatru than the expert that's read every piece of the lore, but who's never made an offering. So Alan has disappeared into the ether. I'm gonna skip a question in the line while he is gone. What is your stance on devotional Asatru music? What some reconstructionists will call Blotsånger. It would be awesome if we had more of it. The concept of it is fantastic, and I love it. I don't hear an abundance of it. There's not a lot of it that has broken through and become a tradition and become solidified. I think there are people that work on it. I wish that we had more of it. I've always really wanted some like Asatru bluegrass. Unironically, I think that would be beautiful and awesome. But yeah, I'm really pro Asatru devotional music. And there was a piece that Argithia Lauren Anderson made and was working on that I've been trying very hard to get recorded and released in some way because it was beautiful. And I'd like to see that more. And I'd like y'all to get a chance to hear that. I will continue to pester and try to make sure that gets done. Might be a dumb question. When you join Asatru, are you required to formally declare a patron deity? Also, does prayer need to be talking / asking for things, or can it simply be listening? So no, you're not required in any way to choose a patron deity. That is irregular and was always irregular. Wasn't unheard of. It's not inappropriate, but there's not a need to choose a patron deity. It's one of the beauties of polytheism is that all of these are your gods and you can develop a relationship with all of them. And there's a beauty in that. You don't have to have they're not in conflict with one another. You don't have to choose one. Like, I'm Team Thor, well, I'm Team Freyr. It doesn't have to work like that. There are people who have a particular devotional relationship to one of the deities, but that's the exception and not the rule, certainly. Also, to answer the last part of your question, I think it just comes in words and what the meaning is. I think the point of your question, no, prayer doesn't have to be talking and asking, it can be listening. But when we're talking about prayers, we mean talking and asking. I think people will phrase the listening part as meditating, but I think that's just a linguistic distinction and not, I think it misses the meat of your question. All of our worship of our gods is about a gifting cycle. It's about an interaction. So we don't just pray at our gods. We certainly pray, expressing ourselves to them. But we should always be listening for response or for interaction from that. I think any prayer situation should inherently facilitate some stillness and some reflection and some meditative, being present for absorbing that response, however it comes to you. And I think listening is part of that. Alan, do you have anything to add on the question? You weren't here for the question. Might be a dumb question. When you join Asatru, are you required to formally declare No, they said this. I didn't say that. I wouldn't insult our questioners that way. Are you required to formally declare a patron deity? And does prayer need to be talking/asking, or can it simply be listened?
I apologize for my brief absence. I was fooling around with my screen and managed to mute the program somehow, and I couldn't figure out how to unmute it. So I left and came back. So I rebooted the live stream. So sorry about that. No, you're certainly not required to declare a patron deity. Some people have a special affinity for one deity or another. Like, again, in the olden days, it was kind of this thing like people felt pressured to decide, whether they were more a Thorsman or a Odinsman or whatever. Of course, back in those days too, we were, everybody was taking a Viking name. Half the practitioners Asatru that I knew from like up until I got closer to the AFA, they all had like their Viking name or their practice name, whatever they called it, which, that luckily has gone by the wayside. So no, you certainly, and I think that's true both because like our gods are, our gods are the gods of all of us. And also, like, unlike the Greek panoply, which to my understanding, like they're, the Greeks have, like, and the Romans too, their deities are more specialized. There's a god of emotion. There's a god of impatience. There's a god of, there's a god of a lot of stuff that are, but like for us, like the god of victory could be Odin or Tyr or Freya. So so our gods are a lot more generalist than some others. So no, don't worry about that. And yes, pray, ask the gods for guidance. Ask your ancestors for guidance. Don't ask them for a bicycle.
question, Mr. Flavel, what is your favorite heart song since you mentioned them on a previous episode? Alone. Absolutely. Mr. Lawspeaker, do you have a favorite song from the 80s? Thanks to both of you for hosting VNS. You're welcome. Alan, what's your favorite song from the 1980s?
Rock Lobster by the B-52s. I'm serious, man.
Unfortunately, I know that you are serious. There you have it, folks.
I could sing most of it if you want me to.
No, thank you. I'll pass. I'll pass.
I can sing it in the style of Journey.
That's not nice. Okay, so I overthink things. Now I'm trying to figure out like what that might sound like. Because you like cake, it makes sense that you like the B-52s.
Because they're both so awesome.
They are both similar. I would not say similar in awesomeness, but that's.
I like Devo. I like Devo too.
I believe that. All right, so Alan, can you explain the gift cycle?
Okay, the gift cycle. Our gods need things. We need things. And it is very much, our gods need our truth. They need our worship. They need our devotion. They need, like more generally said, and in the greater theory of religion, there's a different word I can't quite come up with, but like as we devote our life energy to them, they become more manifest in our lives. They become more manifest in the world. They become strengthened in their entanglement in Midgard. We are obligated as their devotees, as their soldiers, if you will, to bring that manifestation into the world. So we give to them our truth and our devotion. In return, they give to us guidance and strength and courage. And that is the gift cycle. I should know, but don't, the exact chapter and verse of, a gift demands a gift. Although I'm not positive that that's exactly what that means in that context, but, a lot of it comes back to the underlying or overarching story of the world tree, right? Yggdrasil reaches up into the sky and creates the dew. The dew falls to the ground and nourishes the roots of the tree that rise back up and create the branches that create the dew that creates the life-nourishing rivers that nourish the tree. So in the exact same way, our devotion rises to the gods so that they can nourish our soil, so that we can make more. That's how I understand it. And I know that's a little ambiguous, but I mean, it's that's the way I understand the esoteric of it.
Certainly, what Alan said, but I further make it simpler than that. Again, I think we overcomplicate. It's about relationships. our sharing of gifts, our sharing of things is how we build relationship. It's not just demanded of one party. It is a sharing of things. And that sharing doesn't imply any type of equity of gift. You giving a 4-year-old a bicycle and then giving you a hand-drawn stick figure that may remotely look like you, there's no equity in that. But there is an exchange of, you love your child and you're giving them something that you think will make them happy, and they're giving you something because they love you and they think that you'll really like this thing. That exchange matters. And it's not because your kid needs a bicycle, and it's not because you need a picture to put on your fridge. It's the thought that counts in the most sincere and visceral version of that. It's the energy that you put in to your offering that is meaningful. And, certainly the gods don't need, there's not a mead shortage in Asgard. It's the imbued intention and worship that you put into the mead. It's that exchange of your devotion for their might, for their inspiration, for their blessings, whatever the case might be. And it's cyclical. The more you exchange gifts with the gods, the more you're regularly engaged in that worship gift-giving cycle, the more potent and the more powerful and the closer that relationship becomes. The more you exchange gifts with a loved one or with a friend, the closer your relationship becomes. And sometimes that exchange is, hey, you were really sad and you needed something, you called me up. Hey, I really needed you one time and you were there for me. That's also an exchange of gifts. Building that shared experience over time builds a stronger, more powerful connection. And it also makes the environs that it happens in more powerful. I mentioned earlier about, some of the favorite things at the Hoffs. The fact that the gift cycle has been observed for almost 11 years now at Odenshoff, you can feel the resonance of that in the place because it is powerful. But yeah, it's that exchange of gifts between parties that care for one another is the fundamental essence of that. And you can get deeper with deeper esoteric truths to it. There's layers, but on the most fundamental layer that we all understand as human beings, yes, that sharing of gifts. And the important thing, the divine spark that makes you one of our race, one of our people, that is the first part of that gift cycle. The gods found Ask and Imbla and gave them gifts. So we're always it's on us to do the repaying of the gift cycle to keep it going. We've already been blessed with a gift that we don't have the capacity to match. So they took the first step in that gift cycle. So it's on us to do our part to maintain that gift cycle from our end. Also, Joy donated $20 to BNS. Thank you, Joy. We appreciate you. A couple of more questions have come in since we got on here, so we have a few more. Alan, what is the most powerful bloat you have experienced? Alan, you're muted. You've been muted.
Okay, sorry about that. Thank you. There's sort of a range there, and I don't like to give a lot of credit now to this guy because he's not in the AFA anymore, but one of the very first, and this before I even knew about the AFA, but I was in a bloat where like a very real image of tear appeared to me. So like that manifested the reality of the gods. I was in a small circle with Founder McNallen, and I'm not good at remembering who all is in these things. And Matt, you may have even been there. This was up at Steve's house. And that was, there were 5 or 6 people there, and that was strong stuff. The manifestation of energy there. The strength and manifestation of these things is very real.
So I've talked about this a number of times on here, but I suppose it's always worth mentioning again. Most powerful, and there have been, I'm very blessed. There's been a number of extremely powerful bloats I've been a part of, both as the one conducting the bloat, but also as one participating in it. I remember the first Odin bloat that I was in with Steve McNallen was tremendously powerful. It was the first bloat I'd ever been in with, outside of my small group of people, literally in my backyard in Alaska. It was the first big bloat that I'd been part of, and the founder of Modern Asatru was doing it. It was amazing, and it blew my mind. It was fantastic. The most powerful one, and we tried to reason when it was. I think it was 2017 Winter Nights, was the DCR bloat. And Githya Pat Hall was doing the bloat. And as part of the bloat, we were reaching out to our DCR, our female ancestors. And she wanted us to call out to a specific one of our DCR and ask that they be with us in the circle. So we all called out the name of one of our ancestors. I invited my grandma to be there with me. And they had us close our eyes, and the Githyas went around the circle and, distributed the blessings. And in that moment, my grandma was with me in that circle, and I felt her with me, just like the last time I hugged her. And I felt what her old lady frame felt like in my arms, and I smelled her old lady hair with the hair product in it and whatever else. And she had passed in 2003, but 14 years later, she was with me in that circle, and she gave me a hug again. And it's the most powerful bloat I've ever been a part of, hands down. Next question, I guess 2 questions. Okay, they're looped together. First, have you heard of, Hans, have you heard of Hans Jorgen Lisglimt Johansen, political leader in Norway and Asatru? Alan, have you heard of Hans? Not only have I heard of Hans, I've met Hans. I've been to Hans's home, and Hans drove me from the airport in Oslo to an AFA event in Tennenscheid, I think is the name of the area in Sweden where we were at. Hans is awesome. Hans is a character. That was fun. And so he picked Mandy and I up and drove us from the airport to the event. And stuff we were doing was all in Sweden, but the only part in Norway I got, because we even flew back from Stockholm, we flew into Oslo because we got an amazing deal direct from not SFO, but direct from Oakland. Oakland to Oslo was this amazing deal. Anyways, beside the point. But no, Hans picked us up and he showed us really cool stuff that I wouldn't have gotten to see in Norway. Showed us just kind of driving through Oslo. So I got to see a little bit of that. Took us to Oslo Fjord. Also took us to this park that just the history in Europe's really cool. I know it's not relevant to Asatru, but King Sigurd, the Crusader, who was the, as far as I know, the only Scandinavian king that went on crusade. His grave is in the middle of this like park in downtown Oslo that we just happened upon. I'm looking down and seeing the whatever you call the capstone thing on the grave, and like I'm walking on this king's grave. It was very strange, but really cool. I got to see that. I got to see. He took us by a really cool rune circle that was kind of off the beaten path on the side of this highway we never would have found otherwise. Or not rune circle, I'm sorry, stone circle out there. And it was really neat because it was, again, so many of the stone circles I've been to in Scandinavia are really special because so many of them are just, you wouldn't know. They're not a tourist kind of a thing. There's something that locals know about that you can go check out that are special because it's not cordoned off and not through like plexiglass. You can actually be there and experience in that circle. And he showed us that. And he took us back by his house and fed us some hot dogs. They like sausages over there, and that was cool. And yeah, he was with us for that event. It was really cool. Hans was a great guy. He, I think the kids would say he calf mogged me. We went and we're looking at the petroglyph carvings over there that we see so often in the red, like the red overlay, so you can see the stuff. And the heroes of these were stick figures, and occasionally if they were a guy, they would have like an erection, or they'd have the only other prominent flesh on them was they'd have these huge calves. And he got next to it and flexed his calf, and he had these massive, he said he had calves of the Aryan conqueror, and he said that I had the old Europe calves, and which is the case. He had much more impressive calves than me. But yeah, I got to meet him, and it was a pleasure. Hans is fantastic, and I thoroughly appreciate his hospitality and the time I got to spend hanging out with him.
You got to stop skipping leg day.
I don't. My calves are surprisingly really strong, but they sure don't look like it. So, okay, I guess secondly, can you be a member of the AFA and the ISDS? Because I heard Hans is in both. We don't like to talk about, confirming or denying membership stuff or whatever, but sure, you can be part of both. I don't know all of the details of that party's situation, but no, Hans is fantastic, and I don't see why you can. We encourage, as long as it's legal, we encourage you to be as politically active and involved as you feel is appropriate and you're inclined to be.
I don't think do you know what the ISDS is?
No.
Okay, so it took me a second because I had to cogitate about it. It's the International Satnatna Dharma Society.
Oh, I thought it was related. Okay, I'm sorry. I thought it was Hans's party over there. Yes, okay, Alan, you can speak to this more. Now that I know what he's talking about, I apologize. Alan, tell us about, can you be a member of both? I don't know how that works.
Yes, and I'm less versed in the Sanatana Dharma Society, but it is headed by Acharya Ji, whom I have met and spent a very productive spiritual weekend with. He is very much on the team with us. Sanatana Dharma is the idea at base of the original religion of each folk. It doesn't seem to me, and again, I'm less versed in like the intimate detail of the ISDS, but I understand that they don't have, that structured belief system that says you have to believe like in the Indian, the Hindu deities, and in fact, in Acharyaji's book, which I have bought and given as gift several times, he speaks approvingly of Mr. McNally, quotes him a couple times in his book, in one of the books, the Dharma Manifesto, which is about, the war between the Dharmic religions and the Abrahamic religions. So I certainly don't see any conflict.
So, all right, I apologize for my earlier gaffe on that. Hans's party is the Alliansen, which I guess means Alliance Alternative for Norway. But sure, probably be part of that and be an AFA member also. But as far as the ISDS, I don't know their stance. If you have to be a Hindu, then no, you can't be a Hindu and in the AFA. But as I understand it, Acharyaji recognizes that Asatru is a Dharmic faith. He has always been very supportive of us, personally and in different ways. He speaks highly of Steve McNally in the Dharma Manifesto. If it is an association of people from a variety of dharmic paths to interact with one another, then I don't see that that's in conflict. Again, I would have to know the particulars of what the requirements of membership of that is to really speak authoritatively on whether it conflicts or not. Next question, is soft polytheism or hard polytheism more common in the AFA? McNallen's book says either are acceptable. I am merely curious. The Asatru folk simply are hard polytheists. I can't say that nobody in the AFA is a soft polytheist, but we are hard polytheists in our doctrine, and to the extent that people believe what they claim to believe, then one needs to be hard polytheist to be in the Asatru folk assembly. Are you aware of a large contingent of soft polytheists in our ranks, Alan?
I know that it is within the range, but I have not polled membership to determine which is where.
And then last question of the night, anyone in Anchorage, Alaska in Asatru? I hope so. I certainly was. That's where I came home to Asatru. I was born and raised in Anchorage. I lived in Anchorage until 2010 or so, and then I lived out in the valley in Palmer for a couple of years, before I moved out of Alaska in 2014. So certainly there were people that I practiced with in Anchorage. I know that we have members. It's hard because there's so few people there, and getting people to stick around before other people show up is always challenging. We do have a member in Anchorage. We have somebody down around Soldotna, and we have some folks out in the valley. So that is our situation there. Alan, do you have any parting thoughts?
Yes, point of order.
Sure.
There was a question that you skipped when I was ducking in and out due to my technical misfeasance. So I don't want that person to feel slighted by not having.
It was not. It was the question about my favorite heart song, and where you unfortunately shared with folks your love of rock.
No, it was something else. That one you asked.
No, I didn't. That was the one that I skipped, and I went back to it. I just didn't ask you because you weren't there. What is the stance Alan, would you like to share your stance on devotional Asatru music? What some might call Blootsanger.
Sure. I mean, I Galder. I have a runic meditation that I do every day, runic mantra. And I Galder the Futhark, because sometimes when I sing Lizzo, it just doesn't sound right. So I Galder the Futhark instead. And I picked that up, as I have told many people. There's a Heilung song where they chant the Elder Futhark over and over again. They do it in a slightly different cadence than I do, but that's where because I went to a Heilung concert and saw them do that, and I thought, man, that's cool. And so I found that song and I looped it a couple of times so that I could just get in the rhythm of it. And again, I do it slightly differently now, but yes, I think that is very, very much a way to manifest our order into the world.
All right, well, there you have it. So, final announcement of the night. Starting next week, Victory Never Sleeps will occur at 6 p.m. Central. That is 2 hours earlier than its current start time. I am hoping that's going to be more convenient for most of our guests, certainly for our recurring guests. I hope it will also facilitate some of the members of the audience that it just runs too late for. Maybe they will be able to catch more of it and participate a little bit more. Apologize for any inconvenience it might cause our West Coast folks. Hopefully you guys are all listening to it. If you miss it on any of our like Apple Music, Spotify, any of the places that you can find us. Also looking at this on YouTube. We are, I know a lot of people will consume it at later times, so hopefully you guys can get that. I think it's going to be a good move with time change. But yeah, I want to let everybody know. We'll be, reminding folks as we get closer to it. Thank you guys all for being here tonight. Next week, we will, Spawn and I will continue on the Gylfaginning. We are almost through that, but we have generated some really interesting and I think very important conversations come along with that, which has been great. Alan, it's been awesome talking to you tonight. We always get on and I the initial conversation gets done in the first 45 minutes and then we are able to spend a couple of hours on some really good questions from the audience. So thank you everybody who's contributed. And Alan, these Adulting with Alan episodes are a favorite of many. So thank you for coming on tonight. All right, folks, we will see you next time. Until then, hail the ICEER, hail the folk, hail the AFA, and remember, victory never sleeps.